Welcome, traveler through time, to another journey into history's quieter corners. Tonight, we venture into the vast expanse of the Ottoman Empire, that great tapestry of power and pain that stretched across 3 continents for over 6 centuries. Here, beneath the glittering domes and soaring minarets, millions of souls lived lives of remarkable complexity, some wielding immense power, others bearing crushing burdens, all woven into the intricate fabric of one of history's most enduring empires. Close your eyes now, and let yourself drift back through the centuries. Feel the warm Mediterranean breeze carrying the scent of spices from distant markets, hear the gentle lapping of waves against the Golden Horn, and imagine yourself stepping through the gates of a world where East met West in ways both beautiful and brutal. Tonight, you will walk in the sandals of a Janissary recruit, experiencing the transformation from village boy to elite soldier. You will witness the golden age under Suleiman the Magnificent, when the empire reached its zenith of power and cultural achievement. You will explore the mysterious hidden chambers of Topkapi Palace, where secrets were kept and power was wielded in shadow. And finally, you will glimpse life within the imperial harem, that most private and protected space where hundreds of women lived in luxury and constraint. The Ottoman Empire was a realm of paradoxes, breathtaking beauty built upon human suffering, remarkable tolerance shadowed by brutal enforcement, cultural flowering nourished by the tears of the conquered. As you settle into comfort tonight, let these stories carry you gently backward through time, to a world both magnificent and merciless, where the rhythm of daily life pulsed with the heartbeat of empire. Imagine yourself as a young boy, perhaps 12 years old, tending your family's small flock of sheep on a hillside in the Balkans. The year is 1550, and the morning mist clings to the valleys of what will one day be called Serbia. Your world is small, bounded by your village's stone houses, the parish church with its weathered wooden cross, and the endless cycle of seasons that governs your father's fields. But today, that world is about to shatter and reform in ways you cannot yet comprehend. You hear them before you see them, the steady rhythm of horses' hooves on the dirt road, the jingle of metal, the low murmur of voices speaking in a language that sends a chill through your village. The devshirm has come, the child levy, the blood tax that feeds the empire's most elite military force. The Ottoman officials move through your village with practiced efficiency, their silk robes a stark contrast to the rough homespun of your neighbors. They are not cruel, these men indeed. They carry themselves with a certain dignity, even kindness, but their purpose is inexorable. They examine the boys of your village with the careful attention of a master craftsman selecting his materials. Strong limbs, clear eyes, quick wit, these are the qualities they seek. Your mother's hand trembles as she braids your hair one last time. Your father, weathered from years of tilling reluctant soil, cannot meet your eyes. They know, as you are beginning to understand, that this is both ending and beginning. The boy who tends sheep will die today, metaphorically speaking. What will be born in his place is something else entirely, something that serves the Sultan and the greater glory of the empire. The journey to Istanbul takes weeks. You walk in a column of perhaps 100 other boys, all torn from their homes, all carrying the same mixture of terror and bewildered hope. The Ottoman guards treat you with stern, but not unkind discipline. They know that you are valuable not merely as future soldiers, but as an investment in the empire's continued strength. A dead or broken recruit serves no one. At night, huddled around carefully tended fires, you hear fragments of stories from boys who speak different languages, worship in different ways, dream different dreams. There is Dimitri from a Greek fishing village, his hands still smelling of nets and brine. Marco from the Bosnian forests, who can track a deer for miles. Stefan from the Hungarian plains, who knows the songs his grandmother sang while spinning wool through the long winter nights. You are being absorbed into something larger than yourselves, something that will strip away your individual histories and remake you in the image of the empire's needs. It is a process both terrible and remarkable, the systematic transformation of conquered children into the most loyal servants of their conquerors. Istanbul, when you finally see it, defies comprehension. The city spreads before you, a dream made manifest, countless domes catching the morning light, minarets piercing the sky like stone prayers, the great Bosphorus flowing between Europe and Asia like a river of liquid silver. The very air thrums with commerce and power. The scent of exotic spices mingles with the salt tang of the sea and the smoke of 1,000 cook fires. You are housed in one of the palace schools, not the Grand Topkapi itself, but one of its satellite institutions where young recruits are transformed into janissaries. The building is austere, but not uncomfortable. Clean stone walls, narrow windows that let in carefully measured light, dormitories where you sleep on simple but adequate bedding alongside boys who were, like you, recently torn from everything they had known. The process of transformation begins immediately. Your Christian name is taken from you not violently, but as naturally as a snake sheds its skin. You are given a new name, Turkish in sound and meaning. You are taught to speak Ottoman Turkish with the same dedication that monks copy scripture. Hour after hour, day after day, the guttural consonants and flowing vowels reshape your very thoughts. Physical training follows a rhythm as predictable as the seasons. Dawn brings the call to prayer, and you learn the graceful movements of Muslim devotion. Your body, once accustomed to the random demands of farm life, learns the precise disciplines of military exercise. You run until your lungs burn, climb ropes until your hands bleed, practice sword forms until the movements become as natural as breathing. But the most profound change is internal. You are taught that your highest honor lies in service to the Sultan, that your deepest loyalty belongs to the empire that has claimed you. The process is not forced brutally upon you. Instead, it seeps into your consciousness like water into soil. Your instructors are men who underwent the same transformation decades earlier. They understand your confusion, your grief for your lost home, and they guide you through it with a mixture of firmness and genuine care. You learn to read and write in Ottoman Turkish, Arabic, and Persian. Your mind, once occupied with the simple concerns of rural life, expands to encompass poetry, mathematics, theology, and military strategy. You study the Quran with the same attention you once gave to your father's lessons about weather and crops. The verses become familiar, then comforting, then integral to your understanding of the world. The older recruits teach you the unwritten codes of Janissary life. You learn that despite your elite status, you are bound by rules as rigid as iron chains. Marriage is forbidden. Until retirement, the empire demands your complete devotion. Alcohol, though readily available in the cosmopolitan capital, is prohibited. Your loyalty must flow in one direction only, upward to your officers, your general, your sultan, and ultimately to Allah, who ordains all earthly power. Training with weapons becomes the central focus of your days. You learn the curved yataghan sword, feeling its balance in your hand until it becomes an extension of your arm. The musket, that revolutionary weapon that gives the Janissaries their devastating advantage, requires different skills: steady breathing, precise aim, the ability to reload quickly under pressure. You practice until loading, firing, and reloading become as natural as walking. But warfare, you discover, is not merely about individual skill with weapons. You learn to move as part of a unit, to respond to orders without hesitation, to maintain formation even when cannons thunder and the ground shakes beneath your feet. The Janissary Corps is famous throughout Europe for its discipline, and you begin to understand why. Every movement, every response, every tactical decision has been drilled into you until conscious thought becomes unnecessary. The empire provides for your physical needs with systematic efficiency. Your food, while simple, is adequate and regular. Your clothing marks you as belonging to the Sultan's household, a privilege that sets you apart from the common soldiers of other armies. You wear the distinctive white felt cap of the Janissary with growing pride, understanding that it represents not just military rank, but membership in an elite brotherhood. Years pass in this rhythm of training, study, and gradual transformation. The boy who once knew every sheep, his father's flock by name, thinks in Turkish, dreams of military glory, and feels his pulse quicken at the thought of serving the Empire in battle. Your past has not been erased, it exists still, like a distant country you once visited, but it no longer defines you. When you finally take your place in the Janissary ranks, you understand that you have become something unique in the world of your time. You are a slave who commands respect, a soldier whose loyalty cannot be bought or broken, a man torn from one world and perfectly fitted into another. The Empire has invested years in your creation, and you represent the culmination of one of history's most systematic approaches to military excellence. Standing in formation with your fellow Janissaries, feeling the weight of your musket in your hands and the warmth of absolute loyalty in your heart, you embody one of the great contradictions of the Ottoman system. You are both victim and beneficiary, conquered and elite, a living symbol of the Empire's ability to transform pain into power, loss into loyalty, and human suffering into military supremacy. The rhythm of your new life pulses with the heartbeat of Empire, and as you march toward your first campaign, you carry within yourself the complex legacy of the Dev Sherma system that created some of history's most formidable soldiers through means both terrible and remarkable. The village boy is gone forever, but what has taken his place serves a power that spans continents and shapes the destiny of millions. The year is 1520, and the great bells of Europe toll with an anxiety that reverberates from the towers of Vienna to the harbours of Venice. Selim the Grim has died, and his 26-year-old son has ascended to the throne of the Ottoman Empire. The European courts exchange worried dispatches, their ambassadors writing urgent reports about this young sultan who seems to possess his grandfather's administrative genius and his father's military ruthlessness in equal measure. They do not yet know that they are witnessing the rise of a man who will be remembered as Suleiman the Magnificent, though he himself will never use that title. To his own people, he's Suleiman the Lawgiver, a distinction that reveals much about how power was understood within the empire itself. Imagine yourself now in the great council chamber of Topkapi Palace, where the early morning light filters through latticed windows, casting geometric patterns across Persian carpets worth more than most European kingdoms' annual revenues. The air carries the subtle fragrance of sandalwood and roses, carefully chosen scents that speak of wealth, so vast it can afford to perfume the very atmosphere where decisions affecting millions will be made. Suleiman enters with the measured pace of absolute authority. At 26, he's tall for his time, with penetrating dark eyes and a carefully maintained beard that frames a face both intelligent and implacable. His movements speak of a man who has never questioned his right to command, yet his attention to the details of governance reveals someone who understands that true power lies not in dramatic gestures, but in the patient accumulation of wise decisions. The daily rhythm of imperial administration unfolds around him, precisely choreographed dance. Petitions arrive from across the empire, from the coffee houses of Damascus, where merchants dispute trading rights, from the Hos breeding grounds of Anatolia, where tribal leaders seek resolution to boundary conflicts, from the shipyards of the Black Sea, where naval commanders request resources for the expanding fleet. Each petition receives Suleiman's personal attention, for he understands that an empire spanning 3 continents can only be governed through meticulous attention to seemingly minor details. A dispute over water rights in a Syrian village might seem trivial, but Suleiman recognizes that injustice, like infection, spreads. Today's overlooked grievance becomes tomorrow's rebellion. His reforms begin almost immediately, driven by a vision of imperial administration that balances pragmatic necessity with genuine concern for his subjects' welfare. The legal code he develops, the Canon, will govern Ottoman society for centuries. Unlike the purely religious law of the Sharia, Suleiman's code addresses the practical needs of a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire where Christians, Jews, and Muslims must coexist under a single authority. The process of legal reform requires countless hours in consultation with scholars, judges, and administrators who bring him reports from every corner of his domain. Picture Suleiman in his private study as evening falls over Istanbul, surrounded by stacks of legal documents, his personal scribes working by lamplight to record his decisions. The scratching of reed pens provides a constant backdrop as new laws take shape, regulations governing taxation that prevent provincial governors from bleeding their territories dry, commercial codes that encourage trade while protecting craftsmen from exploitation, criminal statutes that balance punishment with the possibility of redemption. But it is on the battlefield that Europe learns to fear the name of Suleiman. The siege of Belgrade in 1521 demonstrates the terrifying efficiency of the Ottoman war machine under his command. European observers, watching from a safe distance, document the systematic approach that makes Ottoman military success seem almost inevitable. The siege begins with a careful reconnaissance that maps every weakness in Belgrade's defenses. Ottoman engineers, trained in the latest techniques of artillery warfare, position their cannons with mathematical precision. The great guns, each one a masterwork of bronze casting requiring months to create, begin their methodical destruction of medieval fortifications, never designed to withstand such concentrated firepower. But the true genius of Ottoman siegecraft lies not merely in superior weapons, but in the comprehensive nature of their approach. While the cannons thunder, Ottoman miners work in tunnels beneath the city walls, their progress measured in careful inches, their goal the systematic undermining of defensive structures. Supply lines stretching back hundreds of miles ensure that the siege can continue indefinitely, while the defenders watch their stores of food and gunpowder dwindle with each passing day. Within the Ottoman camp, the rhythm of siege warfare follows patterns refined over generations of conquest. The Janissaries maintain their weapons with obsessive care, understanding that their lives depend on a musket that fires cleanly and a blade that holds its edge. Camp followers, the vast civilian support network that makes prolonged campaigns possible, go about their tasks with quiet efficiency. Blacksmiths repair equipment, cooks prepare meals from carefully calculated rations, and surgeons tend to the inevitable casualties of war with skills learned through bitter experience. Suleiman himself moves through the siege camp with the demeanor of a man who never doubts the outcome. He consults with his generals, reviews intelligence reports from his extensive spy network, and makes the thousands of small decisions that determine whether a siege succeeds or fails. His tent, though luxurious by military standards, remains fundamentally practical, a place of work rather than idle comfort. When Belgrade falls, it falls completely. The Ottoman system of conquest reveals its true sophistication in the aftermath of victory, rather than the wholesale slaughter that often follows the capture of a city. Suleiman implements a carefully planned integration of new territories into the imperial structure. Skilled craftsmen are relocated to other parts of the empire where their abilities are needed. Administrative systems are established that blend Ottoman efficiency with local customs. The conquered population discovers that Ottoman rule, while absolute, operates according to predictable laws rather than arbitrary caprice. The conquest of Rhodes 2 years later follows the same pattern, but here the world witnesses Suleiman's capacity for what might, in a lesser ruler, be called mercy. The Knights of St. John, those warrior monks who have held the island fortress for centuries, resist with desperate courage. Their grandmaster, Philippe Villas de l'Isle Adam, orchestrates a defense that costs the Ottoman forces thousands of casualties and months of grinding siege warfare. Yet, when Rhodes finally surrenders, Suleiman's treatment of the defeated knights surprises European observers accustomed to the brutal realities of religious warfare. The knights are permitted to leave with their weapons, their banners, and their dignity intact. Their ships depart unmolested, carrying men who had expected death or slavery, but instead received the grudging respect of a conqueror who understood the value of honorable enemies. This calculated magnanimity serves multiple purposes within Suleiman's broader strategy. Word of fair treatment spreads through European courts, encouraging future enemies to consider negotiated surrender rather than fight to the death. More importantly, it demonstrates to his own subjects and rivals that Ottoman power stems not from mere brutality, but from a sophisticated understanding of how to transform conquered territories into productive parts of the empire. The administrative machine that supports these conquests operates with clockwork precision. Tax collectors, following carefully maintained records, ensure that provincial revenues flow to Istanbul in predictable amounts. The Devshirme system continues to harvest the brightest boys from Christian communities, feeding the empire's need for administrators and soldiers, while simultaneously weakening potential resistance among subject populations. Communication across the vast empire relies on an extensive network of post roads, where mounted messengers carry imperial commands at speeds that amaze foreign observers. A decree issued in Istanbul can reach Damascus within days, Buda within weeks. This rapid communication allows Suleiman to maintain direct control over distant provinces, preventing the emergence of autonomous regional powers that might challenge central authority. The cultural flowering that accompanies Suleiman's reign reflects the empire's growing confidence and prosperity. The great architect Sinan begins his career in this period, creating mosques and public buildings that combine Islamic architectural principles with innovations that push the boundaries of what stone and mortar can achieve. The Süleymani Mosque, when it finally rises to dominate Istanbul's skyline, will represent not merely religious devotion, but the empire's determination to surpass the architectural achievements of Christian Byzantium. Poetry and literature flourish in the cosmopolitan atmosphere of Suleiman's court. The Sultan himself writes verses under the pen name Mehibi, creating works that blend Persian literary traditions with Turkish linguistic innovation. Court poets compete for imperial favor with elaborate compositions that celebrate military victories while exploring themes of love, loss, and spiritual longing that transcend the immediate political moment. Yet beneath this cultural brilliance runs an undercurrent of systematic oppression that European observers often overlook, their focus on Ottoman military prowess. The empire's religious minorities, Christians and Jews, live under regulations that restrict their public expression of faith while protecting their basic right to worship. Church bells may ring, but not too loudly. Synagogues may operate, but they cannot rise higher than nearby mosques. These restrictions, while less severe than the persecution common in many Christian kingdoms, serve as constant reminders of subordinate status within the imperial hierarchy. The millet system, which grants limited self-governance to religious communities, reflects Suleiman's pragmatic approach to ruling a diverse population. Christian patriarchs and Jewish leaders become, in effect, imperial administrators responsible for collecting taxes, enforcing civil law, and maintaining order within their communities. This delegation of authority reduces the empire's administrative burden while creating a class of minority leaders whose power depends entirely on Ottoman favor. Trade flourishes under Suleiman's protection, but the benefits flow primarily upward through carefully structured monopolies that enrich the imperial treasury. Merchants traveling the ancient Silk Road routes pay taxes at every major stop, their caravans protected by Ottoman soldiers, but subjected to imperial commercial regulations that favor Muslim traders over their Christian and Jewish competitors. The famous Ottoman tolerance for religious diversity coexists with economic policies that systematically advantage the empire's Muslim population. The harem system, which reaches new heights of elaboration under Suleiman, represents perhaps the most complex intersection of power, gender, and cultural tradition within the Ottoman court. Suleiman's marriage to Hurrem Sultan, a woman of Ukrainian origin who rises from concubine to wife through intelligence and determination, scandalizes the traditional Ottoman elite, while demonstrating the empire's capacity for social mobility even within its most restrictive institutions. As the years of Suleiman's reign accumulate, the rhythm of conquest and consolidation becomes as predictable as the changing seasons. Spring brings military campaigns as the snows melt and armies can move freely across the European plains. Summer sees the great sieges that gradually push Ottoman borders deeper into Habsburg territory. Autumn brings the return to winter quarters and the careful accounting of gains and losses. Winter allows time for administrative reform, legal codification, and the patient planning that makes future conquests possible. The empire under Suleiman achieves a balance between expansion and consolidation that future generations will struggle to maintain. New territories are absorbed with systematic efficiency, their populations integrated into the imperial structure through methods refined over centuries of conquest. Yet the very success of this system creates pressures that will eventually threaten its stability, the need for constant expansion to feed an increasingly complex military and administrative apparatus, the growing tensions between central authority and provincial autonomy, the challenge of governing populations whose loyalty remains conditional on imperial success. But in the golden years of Suleiman's reign, these future problems remain hidden beneath the surface of unprecedented prosperity and power. The empire stretches from the gates of Vienna to the shores of the Indian Ocean, its armies seemingly invincible, its administration the envy of European observers, its cultural achievements rivaling those of any civilization in history. As night falls over the Bosphorus and the great palace of Topkapi settles into its evening rhythms, Suleiman the Magnificent continues his patient work of governance, unaware that he presides over the high water mark of Ottoman power. The moments when empire and emperor achieve a perfect, temporary balance between ambition and achievement, between the dreams of conquest and the realities of rule. In the hushed darkness before dawn, where even the great city of Istanbul rests in temporary silence, the ancient stones of Topkapi Palace hold their secrets close. The palace that served as the heart of the Ottoman Empire for nearly 4 centuries conceals within its walls chambers that witnessed conspiracies, treasured forbidden knowledge, and harbored mysteries that scholars still debate centuries later. Imagine yourself as a palace eunuch in the year 1580, one of the few individuals trusted with access to the palace's most sensitive spaces. Your soft leather slippers make no sound as you move through corridors lit only by the occasional oil lamp, its flame casting dancing shadows against walls decorated with intricate tilework that tells stories of conquest and divine authority. The very air seems thick with accumulated secrets, heavy with the weight of whispered conversations and clandestine meetings that have shaped the destiny of empires. You carry a ring of keys, each one crafted with meticulous precision, each one granting access to rooms that most palace inhabitants never see. The sound of metal against metal, as the keys brush together, is carefully muffled by your practiced hand. Even this small noise could attract unwanted attention in a place where information is more valuable than gold, and silence often means survival. The first chamber you enter lies beneath the palace's third courtyard, accessed through a passage hidden behind what appears to be a decorative panel in the wall of the imperial treasury. The entrance mechanism itself represents the pinnacle of Ottoman craftsmanship, a series of carefully balanced weights and counterbalances that respond only to pressure applied in a specific sequence, a combination known to fewer than a dozen individuals at any given time. As the stone panel slides silently aside, revealing darkness that seems to swallow your lamplight, you step into what palace records euphemistically call the archive of sensitive correspondence. The chamber extends further into the bedrock beneath the palace than anyone has bothered to measure, its walls lined with cedar shelves that hold thousands of documents in copper tubes designed to protect their contents from moisture and time. Here rest the empire's most dangerous secrets, correspondence with double agents operating in European courts, detailed maps of defensive weaknesses in rival nations, financial records documenting the true cost of military campaigns that official histories prefer to forget. The air carries the dry, almost sweet scent of old parchment and the cedar preservatives, creating an atmosphere that seems suspended outside normal time. Your fingers trace the identifying marks on document tubes as you search for a specific item requested by the Grand Vizier. Each mark follows a coding system so complex that even discovering its basic principles would require years of dedicated study. Letters from Venetian merchants willing to sell information about their city's naval preparations share shelf space with reports from Ottoman spies embedded within the papal court, their careful observations written in codes that layer deception upon deception. One section of the archive contains what appears to be architectural drawings, but closer examination reveals their true purpose. These are not plans for mosques or public buildings, but detailed diagrams of foreign fortifications, complete with measurements of wall thickness, calculations of cannon placement angles, and assessments of weak points that Ottoman engineers could exploit during future sieges. The precision of these drawings reflects years of patient intelligence gathering, with information collected by diplomats, merchants, and professional spies who risked their lives to provide the empire with strategic advantages. The most heavily protected section of this hidden archive contains psychological profiles of European rulers, compiled by Ottoman diplomats who understood that knowing an enemy's character flaws could be more valuable than knowing his military strength. These documents reveal the empire's sophisticated approach to international relations, treating diplomacy as a form of warfare conducted through careful manipulation of human weakness rather than open force. Moving deeper into the palace's hidden geography, you ascend through a concealed staircase to reach chambers that exist within the walls themselves, spaces carved from the thick stone foundations and accessible only to those who understand the palace's secret architecture. These rooms serve multiple purposes, all of them requiring absolute discretion. One such chamber houses the empire's collection of forbidden textbooks and manuscripts that official policy declares blasphemous or dangerous, but which the Sultan's scholars continue to study in secret. Greek philosophical works that predate Islam share shelf space with Christian theological treatises and Jewish mystical texts, all preserved because knowledge, even dangerous knowledge, represents power that wise rulers prefer to control rather than destroy. The presence of these texts reveals one of the great contradictions of Ottoman rule. While public policy demands strict adherence to Islamic orthodoxy, private imperial policy recognizes that governing a multi-religious empire requires understanding the intellectual traditions of subject populations. Palace scholars who study these forbidden works help draft policies that maintain religious harmony through careful manipulation of doctrinal differences rather than crude suppression. Another hidden chamber serves as a workshop where palace artisans create documents that do not officially exist. Here, master calligraphers trained in multiple scripts produce correspondence that appears to originate from foreign courts, complete with authentic-looking seals and aged parchment that could fool even careful examination. These forgeries serve various purposes in Ottoman diplomacy, spreading disinformation among enemies, creating pretexts for military action, or providing documentary evidence for territorial claims that stretch the boundaries of historical accuracy. The techniques employed in this secret scriptorium represent centuries of accumulated expertise. Inks are mixed according to formulas that replicate the chemical composition of writing materials used in different regions and time periods. Parchment undergoes artificial aging processes that involve carefully controlled exposure to smoke, moisture, and chemical treatments that create convincing patinas of age. Even the writing implements are specially crafted to match the characteristic stroke patterns of specific regions and historical periods. Perhaps the most mysterious of the palace's hidden spaces lies beneath the harem quarters, accessible only through a passage that begins in the apartments of the valid sultan, the sultan's mother, whose unofficial power often exceeds that of the Grand Vizier himself. This chamber, known in whispered conversations as the Room of Echoes, serves a purpose that combines espionage with what might generously be called early psychological warfare. The room's acoustic properties, achieved through careful architectural design that remains secret even from the builders who constructed it, allow occupants to hear conversations taking place in dozens of locations throughout the palace. Hidden speaking tubes, camouflaged as decorative elements in walls and ceilings, carry sound from private chambers, council rooms, and even outdoor courtyards to this central listening post. The intelligence gathered through this system shapes imperial policy in ways that participants in monitored conversations never suspect. A casual remark by a provincial governor reveals his true loyalty. An offhand comment by a foreign ambassador exposes his government's real negotiating position. A private conversation between Janissary officers indicates brewing discontent that requires careful management before it develops into open rebellion. The women who operate this surveillance system possess training that rivals any professional spy network. They learn to distinguish between significant intelligence and meaningless gossip, to detect lies and half-truths in overheard conversations, and to compile reports that provide actionable intelligence without revealing the source of their information. Their work requires them to maintain detailed knowledge of palace politics, international relations, and the personal histories of hundreds of individuals whose private moments they monitor with clinical detachment. One of the most closely guarded chambers in the palace complex houses what Ottoman records refer to only as the collection of curiosities. European visitors who gain access to the official treasury see displays of jewels, precious weapons, and religious artifacts that demonstrate the empire's wealth and power. But the real treasure collection lies hidden behind walls lined with steel plates and protected by mechanical locks that represent the cutting edge of 16th century security technology. This secret treasury contains objects that tell the true story of Ottoman expansion, items that official histories prefer to forget or minimize. Crowns taken from defeated Christian kings rest alongside religious relics seized from conquered churches, their presence a reminder of the empire's systematic policy of claiming not merely territory, but the symbolic foundations of enemy power. Maps drawn on silk show trade routes and military positions in territories that the empire intends to conquer, with detailed annotations that reveal years of careful planning. The collection includes samples of new military technologies acquired through espionage or diplomatic gifts, experimental firearms from Italian workshops, innovative artillery designs from German foundries, navigational instruments from Portuguese explorers. Ottoman engineers study these items in secret workshops, reverse engineering foreign innovations, and often improving upon the original designs. Perhaps most intriguingly, the secret treasury contains what appear to be scientific instruments whose purpose remains unclear even to modern scholars. These devices, crafted with precision that suggests both advanced mathematical knowledge and considerable resources, may represent Ottoman experiments in astronomy, navigation, or early chemistry. Their existence suggests that the empire's intellectual achievements extended beyond the religious and literary works that dominate historical records. The daily routine of maintaining these hidden chambers requires a small army of trusted servants whose loyalty is ensured through methods both generous and terrifying. These individuals receive privileges and rewards that place them among the palace elite, but they also understand that betraying the secrets they guard would result in consequences extending far beyond their own lives. Their families, their former associates, even casual acquaintances, might face imperial wrath should they prove unreliable. The psychological pressure of maintaining such secrets shapes these guardians in profound ways. They develop the ability to compartmentalize their knowledge, speaking freely about palace life while carefully avoiding any reference to the hidden chambers they tend. They learn to recognize the subtle signs that might indicate surveillance of their own activities, understanding that even those trusted with the empire's deepest secrets remain subject to constant monitoring. As dawn approaches and the palace begins to stir with the day's first activities, you complete your nocturnal rounds and secure each hidden chamber according to protocols refined through generations of practice. The secrets return to their silent slumber, waiting for the next time imperial necessity requires access to the knowledge and power they represent. The existence of these hidden chambers reflects the Ottoman Empire's understanding that true power rests not merely on military might or administrative efficiency, but on the patient accumulation and careful deployment of information. In an age when communication moved at the speed of horses and sailing ships, the empire that possessed the most accurate intelligence and the most sophisticated methods of gathering and analyzing that intelligence held decisive advantages over its rivals. Yet the very sophistication of these secret systems also reveals the empire's growing complexity and the increasing difficulty of governing a realm that spanned 3 continents and dozens of cultures. The need for such elaborate surveillance and intelligence networks suggests an empire constantly aware of internal and external threats, always watching for signs of the rebellion, invasion, or administrative breakdown that could bring down even the mightiest realm. As the morning call to prayer echoes across Istanbul and the great palace awakens to another day of visible ceremony and hidden calculation, the secret chambers of Topkapi settle back into their patient silence, guardians of mysteries that help shape the course of history from shadows that few ever saw and fewer still understood. The morning call to prayer drifts through the latticed windows of the harem quarters, its melodic cadences marking the beginning of another day in the most private and protected space of the Ottoman Empire. Imagine yourself as Gulbahar, a young woman of Circassian origin who has lived within these walls for 3 years, long enough to understand the intricate rhythms of a world that exists according to rules unknown to the outside universe. The harem of Topkapi Palace is not the den of sensual indulgence that European fantasies imagine, but rather a complex social institution that combines elements of finishing school, political training ground, and carefully regulated community. Nearly 1,000 women live within its boundaries, some destined for imperial attention, others serving in capacities that range from domestic management to sophisticated administrative roles that require literacy, mathematical skills, and diplomatic acumen. Your day begins in a dormitory shared with 30 other women of similar rank, all newcomers to the harem hierarchy, who must prove their worth before earning private chambers or positions of responsibility. The room itself reflects the paradox of harem life, luxurious by the standards of the outside world, yet institutional in its arrangement. Persian carpets cover marble floors, and silk cushions provide comfortable seating, but the uniformity of arrangement speaks to the collective nature of your existence. The morning ablutions follow a schedule as precise as any military drill. Water for washing comes from marble fountains, fed by an aqueduct system that ensures constant flow of clean water, a luxury that even wealthy European households cannot match. The soap, perfumed with oils from distant provinces, represents the empire's vast trading networks, while the cotton towels speak to domestic production that employs thousands of workers across Anatolia. Your clothing reflects your position within the harem's carefully maintained hierarchy. As a third-year resident with demonstrated intelligence, but no special imperial favor, you wear robes of fine cotton dyed in subtle colors rich enough to mark your elevated status, but not so elaborate as to suggest ambitions above your station. The fabric itself tells stories of empire. Cotton from Egyptian plantations, dyes from Persian workshops, embroidery techniques passed down through generations of palace craftswomen. The harem's internal geography mirrors the broader Ottoman Empire's obsession with hierarchy and controlled access. The quarters where you live occupy an intermediate zone between the dormitories of newest arrivals and the private apartments of women who have achieved positions of real influence. Movement between these zones requires permission and escort, creating a system where physical location constantly reinforces social status. Your morning duties begin with lessons that continue your transformation from the village girl you once were into something approaching the Ottoman ideal of cultivated femininity. Elderly governess, herself a former harem favorite who has aged into a position of administrative authority, oversees instruction in Ottoman Turkish literature, Persian poetry, and Arabic religious texts. The learning process demands complete mental engagement, for illiteracy marks a woman as suitable only for the most basic domestic tasks. The complexity of this education surprises those who imagine the harem as merely a repository of beautiful women waiting for imperial attention. You learn to calculate household budgets that involve figures larger than most European kingdoms' annual revenues. You study the genealogies of prominent Ottoman families, understanding that knowledge of kinship works and marriage alliances provides essential tools for navigating palace politics. You memorize the protocols of court ceremony with the same dedication that diplomats bring to mastering international law. Music instruction occupies a central place in your daily routine, but here again, the reality differs from European fantasies. The oud, that stringed instrument whose melancholy tones can reduce grown men to tears, requires years of patient practice to master. Your fingers, once calloused from farm work, develop new sensitivity as they learn to coax subtle emotional nuances from carefully crafted wood and wire. The songs you learn tell stories of love and loss, but they also encode political messages that trained listeners can decipher. Praise for successful military campaigns, subtle criticism of unpopular policies, or carefully veiled warnings about potential threats to imperial stability. The harem's economic function within the palace structure reveals itself through your involvement in textile production that operates on an industrial scale. Silk workshops within the harem quarters employ hundreds of women in creating fabrics that serve both domestic use and diplomatic gifts. Your nimble fingers, trained through months of practice, contribute to the production of brocades so fine that foreign ambassadors consider them more valuable than gold. This textile work represents more than mere craft production. The patterns you weave carry symbolic meanings that communicate Ottoman power to those educated enough to read their visual language. A particular combination of colors might reference a recent military victory, while specific floral motifs could celebrate a successful marriage alliance or the birth of an imperial heir. These fabrics, when presented as diplomatic gifts, function as a form of soft propaganda that reinforces Ottoman cultural superiority without explicitly stating political messages. The harem's internal politics operate according to rules as complex as any European court, but with the added intensity that comes from complete physical isolation from the outside world. Alliances form and dissolve based on shared regional origins, similar educational backgrounds, or simply the accidents of dormitory assignment. A woman from your home region in the Caucasus might become a trusted ally, but she could also emerge as your most dangerous rival if you compete for the attention of the same senior harem official. Information becomes currency in this closed environment where knowledge of imperial politics, family gossip, or administrative changes can determine an individual's prospects for advancement. You learn to listen carefully to conversations, to remember seemingly trivial details that might prove significant later, and to cultivate relationships with women who have access to different sources of palace intelligence. The presence of the valid sultan, the sultan's mother, dominates harem life in ways both visible and subtle. Her apartments, occupying the most privileged location within the harem complex, serve as the unofficial headquarters for a power network that extends throughout the empire. When she moves through the harem corridors, accompanied by a retinue of senior women, conversations pause and activities temporarily cease in recognition of authority that rivals that of the Grand Vizier himself. Your occasional glimpses of the valid sultan, a woman whose intelligence and political skill award her to rise from concubine to the most powerful position available to any woman in the empire. Her bearing combines maternal warmth with steely determination, while her eyes seem to evaluate everyone she encounters with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to making decisions that affect millions of lives. The harem's educational system includes practical training in child rearing that reflects the Ottoman understanding that producing future sultans represents one of the institution's most critical functions. You learn techniques of infant care that blend traditional folk wisdom with innovations developed through generations of palace experience. The mortality rates that devastate families throughout the empire receive particular attention here, where ensuring the survival of imperial heirs takes precedence over all other considerations. But child-rearing instruction extends beyond mere physical care to encompass the psychological and political aspects of raising boys destined for ultimate authority. You study the biographical accounts of successful sultans, analyzing the childhood influences that shaped their later achievements. You learn to recognize and nurture different personality types, understanding that the empire's future stability depends on identifying and developing the leadership qualities of young princes. The harem's relationship with the outside world operates through carefully controlled channels that maintain isolation while ensuring access to necessary information and resources. Trusted eunuchs serve as intermediaries, carrying messages, purchasing supplies, and providing filtered reports about events beyond the palace walls. These men, prevented by their physical condition from posing romantic threats, occupy positions of remarkable trust and influence within the harem's social structure. Shopping expeditions, conducted under heavy guard, and with elaborate precautions to prevent unauthorized contact with the outside world, provide welcome breaks from the routine of palace life. The Grand Bazaar of Istanbul, with its thousands of shops and workshops, offers goods from across the known world: Chinese porcelain, Indian jewels, African ivory, European scientific instruments. Your participation in these expeditions depends on your demonstrated reliability and current standing within the harem hierarchy. The foods that sustain harem life reflect the empire's global reach and the palace's commitment to maintaining its residents' health and contentment. Meals feature ingredients from dozens of provinces: rice from Egyptian delta farms, lamb from Anatolian pastures, spices from Indian Ocean trading posts. The kitchen staff, working under the supervision of eunuchs trained in nutrition and food safety, prepare dishes that balance palatability with the dietary requirements of nearly 1,000 women. Medical care within the harem operates according to standards that exceed those available to most of the empire's population. Palace physicians, trained in techniques that blend Islamic medical traditions with innovations learned from captured European doctors, maintain detailed health records for each harem resident. Herbal remedies from the palace gardens combine with imported drugs to create a pharmacological arsenal that addresses both common ailments and the specific health challenges faced by women living in enforced isolation. The harem's religious life follows patterns that accommodate the diverse backgrounds of its residents, while ensuring compliance with Islamic orthodoxy. Daily prayers occur in spaces designed to inspire spiritual contemplation, with architectural details that create acoustic effects enhancing the meditative aspects of worship. Religious instruction, provided by female scholars whose learning rivals that of any male theologian, helps newcomers adapt to Islamic practices while deepening the faith of those already converted. Yet beneath the surface of religious conformity, the harem preserves cultural traditions from across the empire's territories. In private moments, you might hear lullabies sung in Georgian, folktales told in Serbian, or prayers whispered in Armenian. These cultural fragments, officially discouraged but never entirely suppressed, provide psychological comfort for women torn from their original communities and thrust into an alien environment. The system of advancement within the harem combines merit-based competition with the capricious nature of imperial attention. A woman's prospects depend partially on her intelligence, skills, and political acumen, but ultimate success requires the almost random occurrence of catching the sultan's eye during one of his infrequent visits to the harem quarters. This combination of systematic preparation and chance creates an atmosphere of constant readiness, combined with philosophical acceptance of circumstances beyond individual control. Your own position within this complex hierarchy remains precarious and potentially transformative. 3 years of careful behavior, demonstrated competence, and strategic alliance building have earned you consideration for promotion to positions of greater responsibility. You might become an instructor for newer arrivals, supervisory roles in textile production, or even inclusion in the select group of women who assist with administrative tasks requiring literacy and mathematical skills. But the ultimate prize, imperial attention, that could lead to motherhood and political influence remains as distant and unpredictable as ever. The current sultan, preoccupied with military campaigns and administrative reforms, visits the harem infrequently, and when he does appear, his attention seems focused more on political consultation with senior women than romantic interest in newer residents. As evening approaches and the harem settles into its nighttime routines, you understand that your life, while comfortable and privileged compared to that of most women in the empire, remains fundamentally constrained by forces beyond your control. The silk cushions on which you rest, the Persian carpets beneath your feet, and the carefully prepared meals you consume represent luxury purchased through the sacrifice of personal freedom and autonomous choice. Yet within these constraints, you have discovered possibilities for intellectual growth, artistic achievement, and even limited forms of political influence that would have been inconceivable in the village where you were born. The harem, for all its restrictions, has transformed you into someone capable of reading poetry in 3 languages, managing complex financial accounts, and understanding the intricate relationships that govern one of the world's most powerful empires. The paradox of your existence, simultaneous privilege and imprisonment, luxury and constraint, opportunity and limitation, reflects the broader contradictions of the Ottoman system itself. As you drift toward sleeping surroundings that combine beauty with careful control, you embody the empire's ability to transform conquest into consent, to convert human suffering into systematic stability, and to create institutions that endure for centuries through their complex balance of coercion and genuine benefit. The harem sleeps, but the empire it serves continues its patient work of governance, expansion, and cultural synthesis, sustained by the labor and loyalty of women like yourself, who have learned to find meaning and purpose within circumstances they did not choose, but have learned, through necessity and wisdom, to navigate with dignity and skill. As the first light of dawn touches the minarets of Istanbul, casting long shadows across the courtyards where empires once plotted and planned, we find ourselves at the end of our journey through the forgotten hardships of the Ottoman realm. The stories we have followed of the village boy transformed into an elite janissary, of Suleiman's golden age built upon systematic conquest, of the palace's hidden chambers where secrets shaped the fate of nations, of the women who found both privilege and constraint within the harem's silk-lined walls, reveal the profound complexity of human experience within one of history's most enduring empires. These individual lives, separated by decades and circumstances, but united by their common subjection to imperial will, illuminate the great paradox that defined Ottoman civilization for over 6 centuries. Here was a system that could elevate a peasant child to positions of military command while denying him the right to marry according to his own choice. An empire that created unprecedented opportunities for cultural and artistic achievement while maintaining its power through methods that modern sensibilities find difficult to comprehend. A civilization that fostered remarkable religious tolerance while systematically privileging one faith over all others. The Janissary recruit, whose transformation we witnessed, embodies the Ottoman genius for converting potential enemies into loyal servants through methods both terrible and effective. His journey from village simplicity to military sophistication presents millions of similar stories, young lives torn from their original contexts and remade in the empire's image. The pain of this process, the loss of family and cultural identity, the psychological adjustment required to serve those who had conquered one's people, created soldiers whose loyalty proved more reliable than any mercenary army or feudal levy. Yet this same system that produced such dedicated warriors also planted the seeds of future instability. The Devshirme could function effectively only so long as the empire continued expanding, providing new territories from which to harvest Christian boys. When expansion slowed, when the supply of suitable recruits diminished, when the Janissaries themselves began to demand privileges that contradicted their original purpose, the contradictions inherent in the system would contribute to imperial decline. Suleiman's reign, which we observed at its moment of greatest achievement, demonstrates how individual brilliance could temporarily resolve the tensions within complex political systems. His legal reforms, military innovations, and administrative improvements created a framework that would govern Ottoman society for centuries. But even Suleiman's remarkable abilities could not solve the fundamental challenge facing all great empires: the need to balance expansion with consolidation, innovation with tradition, central authority with local autonomy. The golden age he created rested upon foundations that required constant maintenance and periodic renewal. The tax systems that funded his armies demanded regular updating to address changing economic conditions. The legal codes that maintained social harmony needed revision as the empire incorporated new territories with different customs and expectations. The military technologies that gave Ottoman forces their decisive advantages required continuous improvement to match innovations developed by increasingly sophisticated enemies. The hidden chambers of Topkapi Palace, with their carefully guarded secrets and sophisticated intelligence networks, reveal the extent to which Ottoman power depended upon information as much as military might. The empire's ability to gather intelligence, analyze complex political situations, and respond to threats before they fully developed provided crucial advantages in an era when communication moved slowly and accurate information was precious. But the very existence of such elaborate surveillance systems also suggests an empire constantly aware of its own vulnerability. The need to monitor conversations, forge documents, and maintain extensive spy networks indicates a level of paranoia that, while perhaps justified by circumstances, consumed enormous resources and created an atmosphere of suspicion that ultimately undermined the social cohesion necessary for long-term stability. The women of the harem, whose constrained but privileged lives we explored, embody perhaps the most poignant contradictions of Ottoman civilization. Their stories reveal an empire capable of creating institutions that provided opportunities for education, artistic achievement, and even limited forms of political influence for individuals who would have possessed none of these possibilities in their societies of origin. The harem system, despite its obvious restrictions, produced women whose intelligence and political skill enabled them to shape imperial policy in significant ways. Yet the price of these opportunities was the complete surrender of personal autonomy, the acceptance of lives defined entirely by imperial necessity, and the understanding that their value was measured solely in terms of their usefulness to the empire's dynastic and political needs. The luxury that surrounded them, the silk robes, the Persian carpets, the carefully prepared foods served as both reward and chain, making their captivity comfortable, while ensuring that escape remained unthinkable. These individual stories, when considered together, reveal the Ottoman Empire as a remarkable experiment in human organization that achieved extraordinary results through methods that modern sensibilities find morally problematic. The empire's longevity over 6 centuries of continuous rule testifies to the effectiveness of its institutions and the genuine benefits it provided to many of its subjects. Its cultural achievements, architectural monuments, legal innovations, and administrative systems influence subsequent civilizations and continue to shape the modern world. But the human cost of these achievements was enormous. Millions of lives were disrupted, entire populations displaced, traditional societies dismantled and reconstructed according to imperial requirements. The empire's success in creating loyalty among conquered peoples should not obscure the reality that this loyalty was often purchased through systematic suppression of alternative identities and the careful management of opportunities and restrictions that made cooperation seem preferable to resistance. As we consider these stories from the comfort of our modern world where individual rights receive legal protection, where social mobility operates through systems that respect personal choice, where cultural identity can be preserved alongside political loyalty, we feel tempted to judge the Ottoman system harshly. But such judgment must be tempered by historical context and an appreciation for the genuine achievements that this complex civilization produced. The empire provided stability for regions that had known centuries of warfare. It created economic systems that enabled trade and commerce to flourish across 3 continents. It fostered cultural and artistic achievements that enriched human civilization. It developed legal and administrative frameworks that balanced the competing demands of diverse populations more successfully than most contemporary systems managed to achieve. Perhaps most importantly, it demonstrated that human societies could organize themselves on a vast scale without sacrificing all consideration for individual welfare or cultural diversity. The Ottoman Empire was neither utopia nor dystopia, but something more complex and interesting, a successful attempt to create workable solutions to the eternal problems of human governance, solutions that acknowledged both human nature's potential for nobility and its capacity for exploitation. Tonight, as you rest in the safety and comfort of the modern world, with its electric lights pushing back the darkness, and its systems of law and order operating largely beyond your conscious awareness, remember the millions who lived and died within the Ottoman system. Their lives, with all their constraints and possibilities, their suffering and achievement, their moments of genuine contentment and periods of desperate longing, remind us that human experience transcends the political systems that contain it. The village boys who became janissaries found meaning in military service, even as they mourn their lost homes. The sultans who wielded absolute power discovered that authority brought burdens as heavy as its privileges. The palace servants who guarded imperial secrets understood that knowledge could be both treasure and burden. The harem women who navigated their constrained world with intelligence and grace demonstrated that human dignity could survive even the most restrictive circumstances. Their stories, emerging from the shadows of official history, speak to truths about human nature that remain relevant today. They remind us that individuals can find purpose and meaning within systems they did not choose, that loyalty and resistance can coexist within the same heart, that progress often comes at costs that only later generations fully understand. As the gentle rhythm of your breathing slows and sleep begins to claim you, let these voices from the Ottoman past carry you peacefully toward rest. Their world, with all its complexity and contradiction, has passed away, but the human experiences it generated, the love and loss, the ambition and resignation, the small victories and large defeats that filled individual lives continue to echo across the centuries, reminding us of both the remarkable resilience of human nature and the eternal challenge of creating societies that honor both individual dignity and collective necessity. Sleep now, in the knowledge that you are heir to all these stories, beneficiary of the struggles and achievements of countless generations who lived, worked, loved, and died within systems they helped to create and sustain, even as those systems shaped and constrained their lives in ways both profound and subtle. The Ottoman Empire has become history, but the human experiences it generated remain part of our common inheritance, lessons in the eternal challenge of building civilizations worthy of the people who must live within them.